Hello and welcome back into the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I am Steven Serda, joined as always by my guy Rocky Magana, Kramer Sansone in the background, helping us keep this thing afloat. And Rocky, the Kansas City Chiefs win in Denver. Thankfully, um, man, it's kind of hard to feel good after that performance from this Kansas City Chiefs team. They do come away with the win, and the start of this football game, it seemed like, oh, this is going to be the game that we wanted to see from them. This is going to be the bounce back performance after last week's loss. And they're going to dominate this division rival that's been a huge letdown in Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. And everything was going to plan. Everything was going amazing. We're talking about going live early on the post-game show because the Chiefs are dominating. We're like, they'll have second, third stringers in the second half. We can just knock this thing out, have a nice, easy evening. Nope, not the Kansas City Chiefs, not this team. They're up 27-0. They let Denver come back and get within 27-21. Denver ultimately puts up 28 points, and the Chiefs do still get the win, but it is also the most points that the dead last Denver Broncos offense has put up this season. Rocky, your takeaways, your impressions, your thoughts from this football game.
Steven Serda and Chiefs Kingdom. This is the kind of game that'll drive a man to drink right in front of his family. Like you get up by 4 touchdowns and then you just like, oh, the first touchdown. Oh, well, Chiefs always kind of they're starting to give up garbage time TDs a little bit early. And you made Russell Wilson look like he found the fountain of youth until he got knocked out of the game. And then the backup quarterback comes in and you make him look like he's a legitimate starter, and he actually makes it a close game. I mean, come on, like Jerry Jeudy is not Justin Jefferson out there. Our secondary just got smoked the entire game. Yeah, okay, 14 wins in a row for the Chiefs. That's a huge accomplishment. The first 13 were a huge accomplishment. This one feels like a tie at best. Like this is like one of those situations where when Team USA in the World Cup tied England and it felt like a win for Team USA, Broncos fans have got to feel like this was a win for them. Like they made it a close game and nearly beat us. I mean, it was I don't want to get too hard on the team because the win is a win in the National Football League. And if the Chargers lose to Miami tonight, we lock up the division, and at 10 wins, in the National Football League is hard to do no matter what it is. But you just limped across the finish line on this one. It feels like that, like you just dragging a dead leg or your dead horse behind you, trying to get across the finish line by any means necessary when you didn't have to. You didn't have to. Like you came out firing on all cylinders, and then you just got sloppy.
It's in all of my prediction and analysis of this game leading up to this week, I was like, we know exactly what Chiefs team we're going to get here, right? Like this is a bad Broncos team, and the Chiefs tend to not always get up for certain opponents, especially when they know they are just flat out better than that opposing team. And the way things started out in this game, it felt like, okay, finally, they're just going to dominate and they're just going to run away with this thing the way we want them to. And then it all kind of unraveled, and yes, they won. And yes, I don't want to be hypercritical of them in a win, but man, there's a lot of red flags coming out of this game for this Kansas City Chiefs team right now. That's about the worst performance we've seen from this Chiefs young secondary all season long. Like they just did not play well today defensively. I mean, they were dialing up the blitzes and the pressures. They were putting pressure on Russell Wilson all throughout the entire day. And Russell Wilson actually does leave this game. He enters the NFL's concussion protocol, and we see Brett Rippon take over late in the game. But there's just a lot of red flags coming out of this thing with this defense now, where I think before the Bengals game, we're kind of talking ourselves into this young Chiefs defense. Like they're building, they're getting better, and hopefully we continue to see that progress, and they build towards something that can help this team over the top in the playoffs. And now it feels like they're regressing. Now it feels like they're taking steps backwards. And all of a sudden, this young defense with all of these young playmakers and a defense that I think we were building confidence in, all of a sudden I'm worried about the defense, Rocky. And to put it lightly, like, I understand they won the football game, and in the NFL sometimes teams just fall into luck, like that Marlon Mack screen play. Like it was just a total complete defensive breakdown by the Chiefs, and sometimes that happens. But this Broncos team doesn't do that. This Broncos team hadn't scored more than 23 points on the entire season, and the Chiefs gave up 28, and it was kind of a stressful second half performance from this team.
Oh my gosh, it was extremely stressful. And yeah, no, I mean, as much as we try to kind of build up Spags heading into the Bengals game, I mean, if we go back to right after the victory against the 49ers, I wrote that our run defense was as soft as a baby wearing a cashmere sweater. And honestly, the pass defense looks just as soft. I mean, there's no reason the Chiefs needed to blitz as much as they did tonight. Like, Denver's offensive line is horrible. They could have got pressure. They were getting pressure. They could have got pressure without blitzing. Like, why are you blitzing so much and then leaving your young secondary out to dry in the back end? Like, you didn't need to do that, Steve. Like, you're just so stubborn sometimes. Like, that's the whole thing with Spagnuolo is he's so stubborn, and he only knows one way to coach. And that one way to coach, which is bringing pressure and trying to get to the quarterback, doesn't work, which it doesn't work against really good quarterbacks. Newsflash, really good quarterbacks pick up the blitz well. We've seen that. And if it doesn't work and the other team picks up the blitz and they burn you, then he has nothing else to go to. There's no adjustment away from the blitz for Steve Spagnuolo. He's not going to find a way to win man on man, by just rushing four. He's not going to try. He's not going to try.
Well, but like I will say, like, they were putting pressure on the Broncos all day long, and they were blitzing a lot. But I mean, Chris Jones made maybe the biggest play of the game for the Chiefs when it seemed like it was kind of all unraveling. But there's huge red flags on the defensive side of the ball, and we'll get into that a little bit more throughout the show. And I want to remind you guys, too, if you want to get in on the post-game show, if you want to give us some of your observations, you can use hashtag AP Rapid Reaction in the comment section. We will get to those at the end of the show. But let's get into the offense a little bit here, and then we'll move back over to the defensive side of the ball. And I mentioned this thing started out great. Like, we were all kind of flying high, floating, like, yes, this is exactly the performance we want to see from this Kansas City Chiefs team. A dominant win. And, it started out with this Patrick Mahomes flip to Jerick McKinnon that was absolutely insane. And Jerick McKinnon had a fantastic game. He has 112 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Please, can we utilize him more like this? Please, that's what Jerick McKinnon's supposed to be able to do, is be that pass catching back for you. No more Jerick McKinnon in short yardage. We saw Isaiah Pacheco seal the game with a short yardage run because that's what he's really good at, and Jerick McKinnon's really good at this receiving stuff. So they open the game with that. Jerick McKinnon looks absolutely awesome. Patrick Mahomes with the absolutely absurd touchdown pass. Travis Kelce sets a record on his first catch of the game. It was a 38-yard reception. It puts him over 10,000 yards. It's only the 5th tight end in NFL history to break 10,000 yards. Also eclipses 1,000 yards on the season for the 7th straight year, which continues his record for a tight end in the NFL. Offensively, going against a really good Broncos defense, too. Like, this Broncos defense, if their offense wasn't such a train wreck, their defense would win them a lot of football games because their defense is really that good. And the Chiefs are making it look easy in this one. And in the first quarter and the early second quarter, it seemed like, okay, they can't do anything wrong. Like, they're totally dominating. They're just carving up this defense that is a really, really good defense. And then just the sloppy plays started. And I don't know if it was they fell into the trap that this team seems to play themselves into quite a bit more often than I would like to talk about it. They just got a little too confident and a little carried away and started to play sloppy. And Patrick Mahomes throws uncharacteristic interceptions and he ends the game with 3 picks. Like, it was just a sloppy performance. And I don't really want to read that much into a performance like this because I just feel like it's another one of those games where the Chiefs just know they are so much better than the Denver Broncos. And then for it to look so easy early on in the football game, they just got a little too confident in themselves and they started to play sloppy like we've seen this team do multiple times over the last few years.
I think the thing that really just kind of sticks in your craw about this game is that it was supposed to be a celebration. Like, you start out, Mahomes has that ridiculous pass to Jet McKinnon. I mean, he looked like Tim Duncan shooting a hook shot, over there to Jet McKinnon, no look pass. It was amazing. And then you have Travis Kelce going over 10,000 yards. You have the Chiefs, hopefully locking up the West. They were going to be cruising to an easy victory. Like, this was supposed to be a celebratory day. And like you said, sometimes they just get sloppy. They just try a little too much. Or they just get a little too loose, and they have costly turnovers that they don't need to do. Like just lock it up and focus. Like, they just lose focus, it seems like, when they get ahead by too much and there's no killer instinct there. Like, that's the thing I'd probably say about this Chiefs team that really kind of hurts them is they don't have any killer instinct. It seems like they get up by a lot and then they get laid back and lackadaisical about it. And they're like, oh, this is easy. It's going to keep being easy. But what happens is the team on the other sideline is pissed off and they want to come back, and the Chiefs don't stop them because they don't realize that the other team is coming back until they've already scored 2 touchdowns and cut the lead in half. And then the Chiefs think, okay, we're just going to turn it back on. Well, I'm sorry, it's the NFL. You can't just turn it back on. For as bad as this Broncos team is, which they are bad on offense, they're really good on defense, but Russell Wilson is not the Russell Wilson that you remember. He is not the same quarterback anymore. He's slow to process the game. He holds onto the ball for too long. He can't line up under center because he's too short. He rolls out and moves around too much. You can tell he's nervous back there. And you sit there and you give this team confidence that they're back in the game, and then and they're still NFL players. Like, you try to turn it back on. Well, guess what? There's still NFL players on the other sideline. Even if they're bad NFL players, you're not playing some JUCO team out there. You're not going to just be able to turn it on whenever you want. You got to stay locked in the game. You got to stay committed to winning the game and playing your best football, and committed to your team, to your position, and to your assignment through all 4 quarters of the game. And the Chiefs simply did not do this week. And here's the thing is, you say one game might be an aberration, but it hasn't been one game. The Chiefs haven't looked their best for 3 weeks now. They didn't look their best against LA, if we're being honest. They definitely didn't look their best against the Bengals, and they didn't look their best today. The Chiefs are not peaking at the right time.
Well, I mean, there's still plenty of regular season to go, and you already mentioned it. If the Los Angeles Chargers lose to the Miami Dolphins tonight, the Chiefs are going to lock up the division, which is impressive at this point in the season with this many games left on the schedule. Like, that's a big W. You clinch the division this early, but you're still fighting for that number 1 seed in the AFC, which is still right there for you to take and for you to win out and get that first round playoff bye, which is huge. And we know how much that can matter. And you want the home field advantage, obviously, throughout the postseason. But you can't have games like this. And they win. They put up 34 points against a really talented defense. And so there's things you want to point to and say, like, let's focus on that and not focus on the bad. It was just against this offense, it is what makes all of this so much more concerning for me. But there were some highlights on defense. Willie Gay had an incredible pick 6. And it's great to see Willie Gay make that play, just because I feel like we had such high expectations for Willie Gay as a player coming into this season. And he looks really good at the start of the year. Then he has suspension. And I feel like he's kind of been really up and down since then. He hasn't really become this, like, serious playmaker for the defense the way I think a lot of us thought he was going to be early in the season. So it's great to see him do that. And then again, all the pressure that they put on Russell Wilson all throughout the day. Chris Jones had a monster game. Juan Thornhill even had a sack in this game. What it comes down to, though, is just sloppy play. And I think that's really all this game was. I was never truly concerned, like, oh no, the Broncos are going to win this football game. But I was just frustrated with the way the Chiefs let them hang around in this one, because I mean, no disrespect to the Denver Broncos, but that's an inferior football team to the Kansas City Chiefs. Like it straight up is. This is a team that struggles to put up 13 points a game in most weeks, and you let them go out there and put up 28. And all of it was on the back of Patrick Mahomes just kind of making poor decisions. But once they did finally, like they really needed that game sealing touchdown drive, Mahomes did put it together and delivered a beautiful pass to Juju Smith-Schuster for the go-ahead score in that game when he got absolutely drilled by like 3 Broncos too when he delivered that football. It's just another one of those head scratchers, Rocky. It's just another one of those things where you know how talented the Chiefs can be, and you know when all of the stuff clicks, they can go out there and they can compete with any team in the NFL and they can beat any team in the NFL. They just have a bad habit of playing down to competition. And I think that's exactly what happened today, especially they got up early. They think, okay, we're just going to blow this team out and run away with a victory. And then we'll see them again in a few weeks and we'll do the same thing to them at Arrowhead. And it's just not exactly how it worked out on Sunday.
I mean, you said no disrespect to the Denver Broncos, but every disrespect to the Denver Broncos. They're not a good football team. Denver Broncos country, your team's not good. Your quarterback's not good.
Fired after the season.
Like, honestly, this game saved Nathaniel Hackett's job probably for a couple more weeks. If it would have kept going the way it started, Nathaniel Hackett would have been fired after this game. Like, it's like the Chiefs had no business playing this team like this. And here's the thing that a lot of people say is like, okay, we locked up to the division. That is step one, and that is our first goal for the season. But we're not the Seattle Seahawks. Winning the division is not a successful season for this Chiefs team anymore. Like where this Chiefs team is and what their aspirations and what their goals are and what their own expectations that they've stated to the fan base and to the world is that they expect to contend for a Super Bowl. Right. And so winning the division is great, but that's not their goal. That's not the end game. And yeah, it's a step along the way towards the goal. And they may achieve that tonight if the Dolphins can take care of business. So, peace out to Tyreek Hill. Let's do your thing today, for the 1 week. We love you. But that's the whole thing. It's like the division's not enough anymore. And you're not playing good enough to achieve the goals that you stated for yourself.
Well, and offensively, obviously, Patrick Mahomes isn't going to throw 3 interceptions very often. And I think that at least 2 of those picks were really on Mahomes, where he just made a bad throw where he was trying to force something and trying to get something going after the Chiefs kind of hit a wall in the middle of the game. And he's not going to do that most weeks. And, he's in the middle of an MVP campaign and he's trying to get that award for the second time in his NFL career. And I understand the Chiefs want to throw the ball. They want to be a high scoring offense. But man, today seemed like a good game where you could have just run. You could have just run the ball all day. Isaiah Pacheco had another nice game. I already mentioned his huge fourth quarter carry that sealed the game for them, where he just absolutely mowed down a Denver Broncos defender. But it's frustrating because we see Pacheco going through this growth every week, and he has been impressive. He has been playing really well in the opportunities he's getting. We see Jerick McKinnon have that huge role in the receiving game that I'd like to see more of moving forward, with Pacheco being the early down running back. And the Chiefs just didn't seem interested in running the football. And Denver, as good as their defense has been this season, that's where you beat them, is on the ground. They give up a lot of rushing yards. They're not a particularly good against the run. And it felt like after the first Patrick Mahomes interception, like you could have settled things down just by saying, okay, let's just run the ball, control the clock, and get out of here without making any more mistakes. But they continued to force it. And that's why we were stressed out in the middle of that game instead of just running away with a win.
Bingo, Steven Serda. Bingo. I tweeted out in the first quarter, just give Pacheco the ball 35 times today and let him run for 250 yards. The man's he's a young man. He's got live legs. And this was the type of game where get out to an early lead and then just grind it out, and just pick up first downs, move the chains on the ground and just protect the football and get the game over as fast as possible. And Andy Reid and the Chiefs refuse to lean on the run game. It's just he's a West Coast pass first coach, and he's going to revert to that every single time. And it can be very aggravating, kind of like it was today, when they wouldn't just like the running game was there, like it was very successful, and they wouldn't go to it. And then, how can I say this? I used to be a huge proponent of the Michael Burton third and one run. It hasn't worked for 6 weeks. Like, you got Pacheco now. Pacheco, like I was a fan of the Michael Burton 3rd and 1 run when Clyde was taking that carry. But you got Pacheco now. Pacheco's much better in that 3rd and 1 situation. Just give it to the man. Like, you made him the starting running back, then let him be the starting running back and let him go out there and be the one responsible to pick you up the yards. And if he can't pick you up the yards, then you know that you need a new starting running back. And so if you would just watch it, so if you're just an average fan who didn't watch this game of the NFL, and you turn on SportsCenter tonight and you watch the highlights of this game, and you just see the Chiefs highlights, you don't see the Mahomes interception, you don't see the defense giving up the big throws, you just see the Chiefs highlights, you're going to think to yourself, oh man, the Chiefs played awesome. Because the Chiefs had some really awesome plays in this game. Like, they had some great sacks, they had some great turnovers. Willie Gay, that interception where he tipped the ball and came down with it, was probably one of the best plays of his career. Like, the highlights of this game were so high and the lows were so low. Like, just bring up your floor, Chiefs. Like, that's all you got to do. Eliminate the mistakes and bring up your floor. And you're a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to overreact too much to this game. I think it didn't play out exactly how I thought it would, but the end result is basically what I thought it was going to be in this game, where in the middle of the game, the Chiefs just seemed to lose interest in what was going on, and they let the Broncos get back into it, and it winds up being kind of an ugly performance by the Kansas City Chiefs, but again, they win. So that's all you got to do. Like, you just can't lose games to bad football teams. They've already got one loss this season to the Indianapolis Colts, who are in fact a bad football team. So you just can't lose one of these games, because if you slip up and you lose one of these games, like you've got Houston next week, Seattle after that, then you've got Denver again. If you slip up and lose one of those games, you can cost yourself a first round bye. That's all that matters right now, is trying to clinch that home field advantage and that first round bye. And Buffalo's got a much tougher schedule than you do. So you can't slip up. You just can't lose to one of these bad football teams. And the Seahawks are a pretty good football team, though they did lose to the Carolina Panthers today. But the Seahawks are a challenging team, at least. But you can't lose one of these games to the Broncos or the Texans or the Raiders. Like, you have to win those football games to ensure that you have an opportunity to try to get that first round bye. And as far as the defense goes, I think we need to have a conversation about Steve Spagnuolo, but it's not the conversation that I think a lot of Chiefs fans are going to be having, because I'm all of a sudden seeing a lot of, we got to get rid of Spags, we got to fire Spags and get a new defensive coordinator. I think Steve Spagnuolo is a great defensive coordinator. I think for most of the season, Steve Spagnuolo has had a great year as a defensive play caller. And considering all of the youth that they have on that side of the ball, I've been really impressed with Spags this season for the most part. And, the Chiefs not being able to generate enough pressure sometimes with their defensive line and him having to dial up those blitzes and things like that. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure being put on Steve Spagnuolo for results. And I think for the most part, he's delivered on those results. But now we're starting to see some growing pains. Now we're starting to see him get exposed a little bit. But I don't think that's all on Steve Spagnuolo. I think the Chiefs' tackling issues are a real problem. I think that's the biggest issue facing this defense moving forward. And you talk about trying to play some of these better teams in the NFL once you get into the playoffs. The Kansas City Chiefs seem like they're one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL. Everybody gets yards after contact against the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's something you have to fix, and it's something that you can fix. I don't know how they fix it, but they've got to figure that out. They have to figure that out before the playoffs.
Literally, if I see our like if you think about the secondary, who are supposed to be the best tacklers in the secondary? the safeties. They're supposed to be sure tackling people who are your last line of defense. And we've seen back-to-back weeks where Justin Reed last week and then this week Juan Thornhill, they look like they don't know how to tackle at all. They look like the worst tacklers on the defense. Like Juan Thornhill's just walking up to guys, stopping flat-footed and trying to give them a hug and reach out and pull them into him. Like, I don't know what they are thinking, but the fundamentals, aside from Nick Bolton, the fundamentals of tackling on this defense seem to be a foreign concept that they just forgot along the way somewhere on their way to the NFL. And they really need to humble themselves and get back to basics. And it's on Spagnuolo. Like, I don't think we need to fire Spagnuolo either. Like, I'm not a guy who's going to sit here and beat the drum saying, fire a coordinator, fire a coordinator. I don't even think the Chiefs necessarily need to fire Dave Tube for all the problems that the special teams have had this year, which, by the way, special teams had a good day today. So hats off to Dave Tube. He had a good week today when some of the other coordinators didn't. But don't fire Spags, but you really got to have a come to Jesus talk with him and say, hey, man, this is your responsibility. These are your guys. This is your unit. And they're not putting a good product on the field. Like don't fire him. Like, cause Andy Reid's not going to fire a coordinator unless it's a super extreme situation anyway, unless we're averaging giving up 40 points a game. He's not going to fire Spags, so.
Yeah. And I'm nowhere near that. Like, I feel like we're overreacting a little bit here. Like, this isn't like the Bob Sutton days. Like, I think Steve Spagnuolo is a very good defensive coordinator. I think you could do a lot worse than him in the NFL today. And I do think that there needs to be a little bit more room for error when you acknowledge Joshua Williams and Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson and George Karlaftis and like all of these rookie players that are getting high snaps and expected to be high impact players for this defense. I think they need to have a little bit more room for error because there's going to be some growing pains. And largely, Trent McDuffie's been excellent. Largely, Joshua Williams has been pretty promising. Jalen Watson has been pretty promising for the Kansas City Chiefs defense, but they're all rookie players. They're all going to have games where they look bad. And today, as a whole, the secondary was just bad. Like, it was just a bad performance from the Kansas City Chiefs. But I'm not there with Spags yet. I still think that he can be an excellent defensive coordinator. I think that for a lot of the season, he has been an excellent defensive coordinator. And hopefully these are things that they can get figured out. I just think it's got to start with the tackling. I don't know if they need to do more drills in practice. I don't know if they need to hit the bags more or what, but they have to figure out their tackling issues because that's been the biggest thing to me over the last month or 6 weeks even, where it felt like they started out the season strong, and we've seen this team have this issue in the past. It's not just a this year problem. This is a problem that they've had going back multiple seasons now, but it's gotten worse as the season's gone on. And that's what you can't have, right? Like, you can be a little subpar at it sometimes as long as you get it together most of the time, but you can't be okay for part of the season and then have like a steep decline. And that's what they're in the middle of right now. They've got to figure that part out defensively. And I think if they can figure that part out defensively, there's still plenty of reason to be really optimistic about this defense heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole thing is there's one thing you can't have regression on is tackling. Like that's the whole point of the defense. Like, yeah, we want them to create turnovers. We want them to get sacks. We want them to do everything else. But their basic function is to tackle the offense and keep them in front of them and don't let them get in the end zone. Right. And how often do we see them just get drugged down the field? 2-3 guys being drugged down the field. Like I'm sorry, like you see that on bad teams defenses. You don't see that. You don't see that on really, really good defenses. And I think that the Chiefs have all the pieces to be a really good defense. And like you said, I think Spags is a really good coach. I think Andy Reid is one of the best head coaches in history. But for some reason, they have not put an emphasis on the fundamentals of tackling. They've almost like assumed that their guys know how to tackle, and they got to go full Mighty Ducks and just break it down and get back to basics and build it up from the ground up if they want to achieve their goals this season. And I think to some extent on offense also, like Mahomes has got like we love Mahomes because he takes the risks and he plays out of structure and he's amazing. He's the best quarterback I think in the history of football. But But today, he played sloppy, and he's got to kind of go back and look at the tape. He hasn't played his best football in the last couple of weeks. And I think that this is his floor, which is amazing that if this is Patrick Mahomes' floor, then we got nothing to worry about. Like, the sky isn't falling, but he's at his floor right now, and he needs to find a way to get rid of whatever this is, this bad juju he has going on right now, and get locked back in.
Yeah, and I just want to see them put it all together before we get to the playoffs. Like, what I'm afraid of is the early season schedule was so difficult and so front loaded for the Chiefs that it was every week you're going against a top tier NFL team, a top tier defense, and you have to play exceptional to go out and get that win. And now the back half of the schedule is so light. I'm afraid we're just going to see a lot of these kinds of games. And I think that they are better than that. And I think that we will see them put together a big performance. I know the Houston Texans almost pulled off a huge upset over the Dallas Cowboys today, and the Chiefs take on the Texans next week. I'm not worried about the Houston Texans. Just like I'm not overly worried about the Kansas City Chiefs moving forward. I still think they're absolutely one of the best teams in football, but there's definitely some red flags that have popped up a lot more recently than they had early on in the season. And so those are things they have to address, and those are things they have to try to fix moving forward. And hopefully they will, and we'll feel a little bit more confident in them going into the playoffs. But I want to get to your guys' comments to wrap up the show. I also want to remind you guys, stick around. If you're listening to us on the podcast page, we will have all of the post-game press conferences after the Chiefs' 34-28 win over the Denver Broncos. It feels as if we never know what Chiefs team we'll see. It's like the Bengals loss got it in the coach's head, creating chaos this week on the field. I feel like we see them go through these lulls every year. And I think it's an Andy Reid thing. I think it's Patrick Mahomes thing, a Travis Kelce thing. I just think that when you have been as excellent as they have for as long as they have, sometimes it's easy not to get up for opponents because you can still win. You can show up with your C performance and still get a win because Patrick Mahomes' C performance is still better than 95% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. And that can be a dangerous thing. I think I mentioned it last season, Rocky. I think we saw the Chiefs do that for an entire calendar year of football last season for the most part. So this isn't something new. This is something they do virtually every year. And I don't think it's something that Cincinnati did. I just think they hit these lulls and they play sloppy and they make mistakes. And I think today was just another example in a long line of trends for this team.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think that the Bengals loss got into the coach's head. I think the coaches are angry that they can't seem to unlock the Bengals and get over the hump. But the whole thing is that every time the Chiefs lose to the Bengals, it's a close game. It's not like we're getting blown out by the Bengals and they have no way to move the ball or to score points on the Bengals. It's just we're losing close games to a really good team,
And they've got 3 losses against Cincinnati by a total of 9 points. So there was, I suppose, in the AFC Championship game, especially a little bit of unraveling going on in that game. We lose to awful teams every year and make a full run to the AFC title game every year. Let's not get ahead of ourselves until that changes. Yeah, they've just made it a habit over the last several years to play down to competition at times. But then we see when they turn it on, they can compete with the absolute best teams in the NFL. I still think their most impressive win of the season was that dominant win over the San Francisco 49ers, who just absolutely destroyed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers today. And that 49ers team is dangerous. That 49ers defense is exceptional, and they are shutting down every single team that comes in contact with them. And the Kansas City Chiefs absolutely smoked that defense. And we just see them do this each and every year. I'm not overly worried about them. They just got to get out of the funk. They just got to get out of the funk down the stretch.
And, one thing so if anybody out there is a parent, if you think back to the first month of your child's life, you don't sleep at all. I don't care if you're Patrick Mahomes and you're worth $500 million. He's probably not getting more than 3 to 4 hours sleep a night right now with having a a 2-week-old son. Like his son was born the day after the Rams game. And then you look, you're like, oh, he wasn't his best against the Bengals. Oh, he wasn't his best against the Broncos. I mean, I'm not saying that's the cause, but Patrick, just tell the nanny to just take a nap, man. Just try to take a nap when you can. Get rested up. We need you. And like babies will not let you sleep. Like anybody who's had a baby, you know, they will drive you to insanity when they're newborns and they will not let you sleep. And so I'm sure he's probably really tired right now. And I just pray to God that he finds ways to take micro naps over the next couple of weeks because we just need him rested up.
Yeah, it's just one of the more baffling things, this Kansas City Chiefs team sometimes. Do you realize the Broncos offense outscored the Chiefs offense? A pick six was the difference in this game. I mean, yeah, but you could also make the case that their 3 touchdowns were created by 3 turnovers by Patrick Mahomes, which are uncharacteristic moves. I mean, they still had enough points to win the football game. And I was never like actually in doubt of this game. That's just the way that it goes sometimes. It was just an ugly all-around performance outside of the first quarter from the Chiefs. Like, they made it look easy in the first quarter, then they played sloppy for virtually the rest of the game. That's just how they play sometimes.
Yep, and you know what? Yeah, their offense outscored our offense, but thank God our defense outscored their defense then. You know?
And with the Broncos, it's man, this team, and we've had to watch the Broncos in primetime so many times this year because they thought this team was going to be a lot better than they are. And they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. And every single week, I'm like, you know, in the NFL, you fall into a 28-point game. You fall into a 31-point game sometimes with, you know, a pick six or a kick return for a touchdown or something like that. And not this Broncos team. No, they don't ever do it. They don't ever do it. Except this week against the Kansas City Chiefs, they managed to put up 28 points. So it's just how it goes in the NFL sometimes. And, you know, it's hard to come away from that football game feeling super confident in the Kansas City Chiefs, but I still think they're absolutely one of the best teams in football. There are some red flags that are starting to show up, but those are things they can still address with the personnel they have. It's just things they have to work on down the stretch and try to get better at to improve ahead of the postseason.
100%. The sky's not falling, but if Davis Mills throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns next week, check back with me.
Yes, that's the get right game. All right. Yeah. That's Isaiah Pacheco over 100 yards against one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes, make it look easy. Just pick them apart for half, get up big in the first half, and then hopefully you can coast to a win against the Houston Texans next week. But we really appreciate you guys listening to this edition of the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs take down the Denver Broncos 34-28. They can lock up the division with a Los Angeles Chargers loss to the Miami Dolphins tonight on Sunday Night Football. So you're going to want to make sure you tune into that football game. You can follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. You can follow Kramer on Twitter at Kramer Talks. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. We will talk to you guys next week.